Welcome to the Tea Grannies. I'm Elise.
And I'm Mariah. Today we're here to chat all about literary agents, so pour yourself a cup of tea and let's get started.
What is an agent and why do you need one? We have talked about this before. We're just gonna, we have done an episode where we talked about this very thing. So some of this will be a refresher. But the difference here is that we are going to be interviewing a very special guest a little bit later on to, get some actual information. So that we're not just, like pulling up the Wikipedia and saying, well, so a literary agent is, and giving you like a, textbook definition and like, there you go, you're good to go, off into the real world, have fun, but now you still know nothing. We're not going to do that. We're going to talk to a lovely agent and learn all there is to know about agenting. But as a quick overview, because we do like to do that, I like to have information before going into things. Basically, if you want to pitch your book to one of the big 5 publishers or some of the bigger publishers around, you will need a literary agent to get past their spam folder and not get deleted automatically. If you sneak past the spam filter somehow, you magician you. Agents are representatives for authors to publishers who don't accept unsolicited queries. You'll find some presses, usually smaller presses, independent presses, they'll allow authors to just query them directly, and they don't need a go-between. But with a lot of publishers, and especially the major ones, that's just not how they work. So basically, when publishers, I imagine it's when publishers get to the point where like they can't field all the volume of submissions they receive, then they put that middle person in there so that they're only taking submissions from voices that they already know and trust. It's a vetting process. It's a way to kind of lower the overall work that they have to put in, the effort they have to put in to vet submissions. So the basics of a literary agent, they are the networking gurus of the publishing industry. They have connections not just with other agents and publishing houses, but with editors and designers and lots of professionals in the industry that they work with on a regular basis. They are the knowledge silos of what sells, what's hot, what's not, and what publishers might be looking for in the current market, which can change really quick. So they're kind of keeping their finger on that pulse and making sure that they know all there is to know or know where to find information when things change. And they can also tell you what revisions might make your story more marketable and appealing because they, field a lot of submissions. They know what's going on. And they can kind of give some of that feedback before getting you in front of an editor. Some will, some won't. I don't believe it's a fair expectation to have of your agent to provide you editorial feedback, but some of them, quite a few of them have started doing that maybe more recently. And then the big kicker here on the list, the jackpot of the literary agent, is that they help authors negotiate contracts with publishers. And if you're not a lawyer, then you need that, like the rest of us plebs in the underbelly of the world.
So true. I'd be pretty lost looking at a contract.
Oh, yeah.
So the process of getting an agent, we've also talked about on the show, but we'll go over it quickly. So before you even think about it, before you even think about it, you need a finished, well-workshopped and edited draft. Edited by you, edited by someone else, doesn't matter. Just make sure it's as polished as it could possibly be on your own without help. So you also need a query letter, a synopsis, and you need a list of agents who represent the genre you are writing in. So as discussed in previous episodes, do not query your first draft. I say this with all the love in my heart. It's not ready. I don't care if you think it is. It's not. And you don't want to blow that chance reaching out to an agent with something that is just so not ready to go. So get your story workshopped by the writers, edit it, run spell check, and check for grammar and punctuation. Please do that. It just shows that you're doing your homework and that you're serious and that you're committed. Okay. Like all that stuff that story's going to look totally different by the time it comes out the other end. But it does need to be as perfect as you can make it. And you also need to have your query and synopsis workshopped and edit the heck out of that too. And
Yay.
yeah, that's something a lot of people forget to do. They're like, okay, my draft is ready to go, but they don't have anyone look at their query or their synopsis. I think that's very important to have eyes on that.
Agreed.
And be very mindful when you're making your agent list. So this is someone that you're going to have a business relationship with. So do a little research. Remember that agents will never ask you to pay them something to sign you or anything like that.
Scam
so
alert.
Watch out for the scammers, and just do your research. Use like reputable websites and things like that, like Query Tracker, what have you. So once you have all those things ready to go, you can start querying. And this is my other important tidbit. Follow the query guidelines. No, you do not know better than them. You don't. They are asking for something very specific. They get hundreds, thousands of submissions. Do not be the person who tried to be different. And guess what? You will stand out to them, but in a bad way. So don't do that. They ask for 3 chapters, only submit 3 chapters. They're asking for 3 for a reason. So if an agent likes your work and it fits their wish list, that's actually the hardest part.
Yeah.
They'll ask you for a partial or a full manuscript. And if they love that, they'll set up a meeting with you, and then will come the offer of representation. If you guys are a good match, it's possible that you'll have that meeting and realize that you guys don't have the same goals for your writing or for you as an author.
They might even ask you to do revisions before deciding, before that setting up that call. They might ask you to revise and resubmit. I think we interviewed Maya Hampson last season about this on agenting, because she got an agent, and that was what happened to her. So she heard back from an agent who said, like, I like this and that. Here's some things that would you mind revising these areas and then resubmit to me, and we can go from there. And so she did that process and did end up getting an offer for representation after that. But yeah, it can take a long time.
And be open-minded. Like, your story is your story. If there's something huge that you don't want to change and the agent wants to change it, well, you have to make the call. Do you want to change it and get that agent, or do you want to try continuing querying someone else?
Yeah, that can be an indicator that it's not a good fit.
And not a good fit.
Right.
Yes. Like I said, business relationship, you do want to make sure that you guys are going to vibe, as the kids say. So many writers query like over 100 agents before they even get an offer. So this is the part where I say don't get discouraged, even though it's very difficult to not be. Some people query more than that and never get an offer. Some people get an offer their first go.
How
and
dare
we
they?
secretly hate them.
But also,
there's a lot that goes into getting an agent. And that's what we're here to chat about today. But first, we will critique our first page submission.
The stench of blood and feces hits my nostrils, making me cough even though I'm laughing. It's been a long time. A cold wind puffs through the fir trees, drying the sweat on my face. I look up at the fingernail moon. Serene. Perfect for the night's work. Shame I'd had to use the flashlight. Thrown it aside at the first opportunity. At least the area is deserted at this hour. Couldn't let her scream, though. Sound really carries on the night air. The dozens of crooked headstones are barely visible. The one in front of me is unreadable even in the light, as it should be. I position the girl just right, laid out on the old flat grave like she's already in her coffin. Maximum shock value. Here today, gone today. If this place was ever sacred, it sure isn't anymore. I smile and take a few more photographs, the flashes stabbing through the night. I like how I cut their throats. Nice artistry. No solace here. I look at the cheap plastic bracelet in my hand and chuckle. Mandy. I toss it on top of the bodies, a brief amusement. The cops will never get it. I peel off my sticky gloves and stuff the girl's gold cross necklace into my jeans pocket. Something to remember her by. I use one boot to scrape the bloody mud from the other. I'm shivering in the early morning cold. It's starting to rain again. I don't want to leave, but I have to go. Sky will lighten soon. I pick up the girl's jeans and wipe the filth off the knife. I notice that the tip is broken off. Damn it to hell. This was my favorite knife. Oh, well, it's of no use now. Putting on my heavy coat, I slip into the coming day.
Color me intrigued. are we getting a villain's POV or just a villain's prologue? Either way, I am interested. I like this entire first scene. It has a very eerie quality that makes me uncomfortable, but in the best way.
Yeah.
I particularly like the lack of regret and the coldness from a point of view character. I was like, I get it.
I'm vibing with that.
You're a bad bitch, and I like it. I did have a few word choice recommendations. Fingernail moon really fits with the creepy vibes, but it sort of pulled me out. I think a crescent moon would also work well there. It would make the night seem like almost normal, even though it's not. My only other bump, I would say, was why was the flashlight gone? So that stuck me out as like possibly significant for later. And I'd also like to see some description of the girl's physical appearance as she's laying her out. Even if this murder doesn't make an appearance again in the rest of the book, it's just like laying out the lay of the land or whatever. Can't talk today. You guys know what I mean. It'd still be good to have a little bit of a physical appearance, especially like, is she young? Is she kind of older? You know, that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But yeah, I would definitely keep reading. Definitely one of the ones that I would like slam shut in the bookstore and like put it under my arm and just start walking to the checkout. So yeah, I love this. Give me all the spooky stuff.
I am right with you on the like jog to the checkout. Get me out of here as fast as possible so I can go home and read this thing. I also love a good villain POV and am completely on board for the I would read more bandwagon. Like the main character in this one says, maximum shock value. Like, yep, definitely felt that. Even just reading the opening lines as I was like doing the recording for that, I was like, mental note. I said this out loud. Mental note to have a trigger warning in this episode for ew gross. So, well, whatever. Now you have it after we've traumatized you, and we can thank the author. And I love a good gritty, gross scene. So don't worry about me. The descriptions were on point. And actually, contrary to Mariah's experience, I loved the fingernail moon line. I highlighted it immediately as like, this is my favorite line in the whole piece. I love how creepy this is. So, I mean, it could go one way or another. It might be a personal preference thing. It's eerie and uncomfortable for sure. Like fingernail moon. People don't super love talking about fingernails unless they're talking about a manicure.
I was just going to say fingernails would gross me out. And that could be why I was like, oh.
It could be why. But I feel like it's it leans into the genre that we're experiencing. And I kind of assume this will be some kind of a thriller or murder mystery and I think that word choice could appeal nicely to fans of the genre, depending on where it all goes. So keeping that in mind. And then, yeah, to your points, I'm also curious about the girl's appearance and the flashlight. Like, I kind of skimmed over the flashlight detail because it didn't make sense to me, I think. I just kind of skipped it and was distracted by other things. But yeah, what was going on there is someone going to find the flashlight? Like, how did they get rid of it?
I was wondering. Like, is that specifically there because, like, the flashlight will be discovered later? Because then my brain kind of flagged as, like, this could be significant for later.
Could be significant. Could also be, like, an indicator of how experienced the character is at what they do. If they're quite experienced, they wouldn't make that mistake. If they're not, and this is kind of, they're just discovering this area of self-expression,
this hobby,
we're not advocating for murder, disclaimer, then yeah, maybe they would just like toss aside the flashlight because it's ruining their vibe. I don't know.
I want this to be creepier and darker.
I don't want to hold it up under my chin. I want to just get rid of it entirely. So yeah, I'm curious about that. I would want to know more, and if that's not a relevant detail for future, get rid of it because it's a distraction, unless you're thinking of it as a red herring.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
And you could work it in that way, but it needs to be significant enough to be a red herring, and yeah, that would depend on the rest of the story, so I can't speak to that.
That's true.
Take my advice to get rid of it with a very big grain of salt. You know your story best, yada, yada, yada. Thank you for submitting. We're so grateful. Anyways, the main thing that I really focused on in my feedback is I noticed the use of kind of choppy, incomplete sentences quite a bit. And there's nothing wrong with that, especially in fiction, like using that for emphasis and to really bring out the character voice voice that you want in the narration and stuff like that. But when there's a lot in a row, and I especially noticed this when I was reading it out loud, so hot tip, do that for yourself for revisions. It made for quite a stilted, jarring reading experience. So I recommended like tweaking a couple so that you have less jarring ones in a row, just to smooth things out, get the flow going, so that those choppy ones, when they do stand out, they stand out for a good reason, not because they're kind of, getting repetitive or whatever. But yeah, other than that, I think it's very clear that this is right up my alley. Mm-hmm. I want to know everything there is to know about the rest of this story. And who is this villain? Are they the main character or not? Like, that is my burning question.
I want them to be the main character.
I do too.
I'm feeling like more villain main characters lately. I'm like, show me the dark side.
Show me the dark side. Villain gets the girl. Yes. Let's just go that whole, Speaking of tropes. Anyways, that's it. We are here to welcome our guest today. This is Carleen Geisler, and if I butchered that, call me out now. She is an associate agent for ArtHouse Literary and a thriller writer. So welcome, Carleen. So far, I only know you from Instagram comments and the occasional message, so seeing your face and hearing your voice is very nice.
Yeah, I think that's how I found your podcast originally.
Oh, cool.
I think it was on Instagram, and I was trying to remember how. Mm-hmm. Like somebody I know must have shared an episode or something, because I remember just like following the podcast, and then I was like, oh, these people are local to me. That's even cooler. So then I was like, oh, now I have to listen. And then Maria has horses, and so I was like,
girl energy.
I was like, now I'm fully invested.
Oh, I love that so much. I love hearing how like everyone gets connected. It's super fun.
I know. It's great. I love it.
So we're going to kick things off with like just, rolling through the introduction again here. We'd like to know kind of how you got into agenting, and feel free to like, introduce yourself, give us a little more info about who you are and what you do. And how'd you get into this wonderful world of books?
I have had a lot of careers before this. I was not one of those people who knew like from the get-go I wanted to be in publishing. Like I had never even considered it as something I wanted to do. Like I was one of those kids who read a lot, like we probably all were, but like that was the extent of it for me. And then I had a career in veterinary medicine. Oh, wow. And then I had a career in logistics.
Oh, wow.
And I went into marketing, and I do still work in marketing for tech companies. And like all of those jobs, like they were fine, but like I didn't love them. And then I started writing, and then I was like querying, and basically while I was querying, I kept helping people with beta reads and helping people write their query letters, helping people with their synopsis. And like, I loved it. I had so much fun just like writing query letters and stuff that one day I was like, maybe I could do work and make money doing this kind of stuff. So from there, I basically just applied to every internship I could find, was very lucky to get into one. A lot of them still want you to live in New York, which really sucks.
Wow.
Especially because they pay either nothing or very little.
Oh my God.
So there's very few remote ones, but I was very, very, very lucky to get one at ArtHouse, and I have been there ever since.
Cool. So how long have you been there? If you know.
So I started last October as an intern, and then I was an intern for about 8 months before they asked me if I wanted to make the jump up to like associate agent, and I was like, yes, please.
Cool.
And then I officially started as an agent in like mid-May.
Awesome.
That's pretty awesome.
Very awesome.
Yeah. Love it.
Okay, before we jump in, I'm so curious. Oh my God. I have some ad lib questions that you may not be prepared for, and that is okay.
Okay.
But like, I know that a lot of literary agents kind of work maybe more on contract basis, or it's almost like a self-employed situation, but are you an employee, or what does that look like for you?
I am a contractor.
Yeah.
There are agencies that hire like full time and like pay a salary. They're very few, and apparently they are very rough, to put it lightly. Like they will fire you if you're not making your numbers.
Ew.
Like, so as a contractor, like, it takes time to get going and make money, but like all of my decisions are my own. I have the support of the agency and our founder, which is like, she's amazing. She's super supportive. Good. But like, who I'm signing, what types of projects I'm signing, it's completely up to me.
Oh, wow.
Okay, I love that. So being a
Yeah.
contractor has a lot of advantages, I would say, just in general. Like we have a lot of contractors at my day job. So it does give you a lot of freedom, and you can always pick up and go if you want. So like if you were to change agencies, like your authors would come with you. Is that right?
Yeah, they could if they wanted. It would be kind of their decision.
Mhm.
There is some like obviously like some contract stuff where like if we were to sell a book, the the contract would be through the agency. So like I would continue to have to pay my portion like to the agency for I think
Okay.
it's like 2 years or something like that. Because otherwise people could just pack up and leave and the agency would
Yes.
Yeah.
crumble basically,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so there's like little things like that where like it is kind of a pain sometimes to change agencies, but you can.
Mhm.
Mhm. Okay, that makes sense.
Thank you for indulging me. I was so curious.
Yeah.
No worries.
So there's someone I was talking to recently that wants to get into the publishing industry. And so I'm not necessarily as an agent, but what are your tips for someone who wants to become an agent or get into the industry in a way that is not related to them being an author?
So I don't have an English degree or anything like that. Like I very much don't come from a typical background. A lot of people who get into it have like a creative writing degree or a publishing degree or something like that. If you do, actually, whether you do or not, I would say look for an internship. That's kind of like we take interns who want to be agents. We have interns who are just in school and need like their credit hours. We have interns who want to be editors and they just need like a glance into what the industry's like. And as an agency, we kind of try to like decide what skills like they want to enhance and like work with them. Yeah, so definitely I think find an internship if you can.
Yeah, that makes the most sense. I feel like in most industries, like the internships are usually unpaid though.
Yep.
Like you have to do it, but you won't get paid. But it's a good way, I think, to weed out the people who aren't very serious about it.
Yeah.
Along with a lot of downsides, but that is one of the, I suppose, the upsides.
Yeah, and there is like becoming more and more internships that are like on your own time. Like mine was 5 hours a week, and it was basically like I could do the work whenever I wanted. I could do it in the middle of the night if I wanted.
Yeah.
A lot of them are becoming more open to that kind of thing. But it's everything in publishing is a slow change.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
that as well.
Classic. We are moving into the next question now. Yeah, thanks for the information about the internship. I was about to ask, like, how many hours would it look like? You answered that right away, so I appreciate that.
No
now
problem.
I'm kind of like the way that I work is like, oh, that sounds interesting. Like, I want to know more about publishing, so maybe I should do that. It's like, you don't have time to do that. What are you doing? You knew it too, yeah.
I was like, no, Elise,
no, don't you dare.
Hey, our ArtHouse internship is only 5 hours a week. And like most of it is reading. So it's like you read anyways.
Enable me.
I'm like,
oh my God.
I do not need an internship, but that does sound
right. Ooh,
Yeah.
I know I have some classes coming up that might end up being like internship practicum, and that's given me an idea. Like that would actually be hella fun. Okay, but on that tangent note, tell me more. What is your favorite part about being an agent?
Is it cheesy to say like everything?
No, never.
It's funny because like there are aspects of it that I thought I would not like. Like I'm not a salesy person. I was super worried about like the salesperson aspect of it. But what I found is like it's not the same as like a cold calling sales job because everybody is in it for like the same end results. Like every editor you're pitching to, even if you are cold pitching them, which I try not to do, but if I am, they're still super excited. Like they're like, hey, can't wait to read this. And then if they pass, they're always like, oh, hopefully we can connect on another project. Like everyone is always so excited to work with everyone, whether or not you know them. So it's not like cold salesy calling.
No, you're not selling a product and they're like, are you spam? I think you're spam. You're going in my spam folder.
Yes. I'm the person that gets all those phone calls at work, like the cold calls, and I'm just like, click. I just cannot. So yeah, that was a question I kind of had. I wondered how much of of it was the sales, but that's really good to know. So
Mm.
it's like a pretty warm type of industry with
Yeah,
people. Does that
even
make
if
sense?
you've never talked to somebody, like they're pretty
Mhm.
receptive of like saying hi. I talk to editors all the time who I've never met before. I'll email them and they're always like,
Mhm.
"Hey, want to hop on a call and chat?" And it's like,
Aw.
"Okay, sure." Like it's very much like a community, and you can feel that
Mhm.
as soon as you talk to anybody.
Okay, I love
That's so
that. That's
cool.
really good to know. Yeah. It's not how I pictured it, and I like
No,
that.
me either.
Yeah. I love it. So how many queries do you get per week on average? That's one of my
So our agency is very small compared
Mhm.
to a
Mm.
lot. Like I actually saw an agent on Twitter today talking about how they had been open for a month and they had like 800 queries or something.
Oh my God.
Right? That's not us. We get probably like 40 a week, and we have like a
Okay.
shared inbox. So
Mm.
that's between 4 agents, and we also get quite a few that are just addressed to like Dear ArtHouse,
Oh,
which is
interesting.
also totally fine.
Interesting.
So yeah, we do not get a ton compared to other people, which is probably a good thing because like I can
Mhm.
stay on top of them pretty easily.
Mm.
Mhm. Yeah, because I've noticed like, well, when I frequented Twitter a bit more, a lot of agents would say like they were overwhelmed by how many queries they had
Mhm.
to sort
Mhm.
through. And I wonder if that does affect like how you pick your stories too. If you're a bit overwhelmed and you're like, okay, well maybe this one could be good, but like it's just I've got too many other options. Like that affects that at all.
Yeah, I feel like
Mm.
the threshold of like your patience for things that are maybe not like as perfected is probably lower. Like for me,
Mm.
I don't have literally 1,000 queries to look through, so I can like take a little bit more time and like actually
Mhm.
decide like, is this a story I don't want, or is it just maybe not pitched in the right way?
Mhm.
Oh, interesting.
Which like, I will be frank, like I have signed projects that I said to the author, like, we are not using your query letter as part of the pitch letter.
Fair.
Because like some people that's just not their strong suit, and that,
Mhm.
Mm.
is totally understandable, and it's also kind of not fair.
Mhm.
Yes, well, okay, that's something that we have struggled with over the years. Like
Oh,
when
yeah.
Elise and I first started writing queries and like synopsis, I was like, how do I even like I knew how to write a query. Like I'd done my research, but I was like, how do
Yeah.
I make it like actually
Good.
sound appealing? Yeah. Like
Mhm.
it's so much about the delivery and like the
Mhm.
word choice. And then
Yeah.
and so it was more high pressure than finishing and editing the draft. Like the query
Yeah.
letter was the worst part, and it probably went through more revisions than anything else ever did.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I'm really fascinated by your marketing angle on this, since you said like you work in marketing. I also work in
Mhm.
marketing, and I feel like the more I work in marketing, the more helpful it is to the query process. But I also
Mhm.
feel like I keep realizing how terrible I am at queries because of how much I know about marketing. It just gets worse and worse. So that's very interesting to hear. It sounds like you work quite a bit with the slush pile then, of like you just, going through essentially like cold calls, cold emails from randos all over the place. So my question is twofold. Have you signed any clients you've met through the slush pile? I'm guessing yes. And if yes, how many?
So all of my clients except one came from the slush pile. In fact, all of my offers except for one have been in the slush pile. The only one that has not was actually an interesting story. Her and I beta read for each other like a year ago.
Oh.
And when I started agenting, I was looking through the slush pile and I kept thinking about her book. So one day I just like reached out to her. I was like, hey, like, what's going on with this? And she told me that she had a few queries still out, but she was about to shelve it. And I was like, please don't, please send it to me.
Fun.
Yeah, aside from that, it has all been slush pile. People I
Wow.
did not know that I now know.
That's so wild to me. How many clients can you have at a time? Like how many do you have right now?
So I currently have 3. I have one that I've offered to that is in her waiting period, and I have one person that I'm about to offer to. I'm just waiting on a second reader to like finish their read on it first. Although I have already made the decision, but I'm curious about some things that this reader will have to say. So I can have as many clients as I want, like contractually, but basically it's how many people can I keep organized all at one time? Like a lot of agenting is people management and like making sure people are meeting deadlines and making sure that, you know, people are actually writing something ideally. I'm not the type of agent who's going to drop somebody if they're like taking a 5-year writing break, but you know, ideally, like I want somebody to be like thinking about the next thing. So kind of how I've been running that is just like checking in with myself and being like, how overwhelmed do I feel? I'm also balancing a day job right now. So I have, you know, a little bit less time than a full-time agent would.
Sure.
But I am currently nowhere near overwhelmed. Like I feel like I could take on like way more clients at this point. And that's kind of my goal, is to like really build it up while I still feel like I have that momentum going, and then hopefully I can maybe scale back on having a day job eventually.
Yeah.
That was going to be my next question, was like the goal is full-time agenting, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So how many clients do you think you'd have to consider it full-time?
I don't think I would feel comfortable. I mean, it depends on like how many sales are currently going on, and more than clients.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine being comfortable with being full-time until I had like probably like 20 plus clients.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So when you sign clients, do you want them for just one project, or are you looking for like long-term partnerships with each one? Or does it depend on kind of what their career goals are?
It depends. I prefer to work with somebody long-term if that's what they want to do. We do offer 2 contract types at our agency. One is called an all works. It's where like I represent you from now on for everything you write. One is just a single work. So we just sign basically per project, and anything new that they write, we decide together, like, do we want to work on this together or not? I prefer the all works because it gives me the opportunity to like advise on ideas and like help develop something before it's an official project. I can't really do that with a single works because it's not contracted to me. I mean, I could out of the kindness of my heart, but it might come back to bite me if they don't sign that project with me and then go on and sell it for 7 figures or something, right?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, I think one day in my dreams when I have an agent, I would like to have the all work sort of setup. So like I could go to them and say like, this is like the idea I'm thinking of writing next. Like, what do you think? Like that's something that would be nice. Yeah, it's nice to have that support when you're starting a new project as well. Like if you go to your agent and like, hey, like this is my idea of X and Y, and they go, oh my God, write that right now. You're like, okay, well now I feel good about writing it and not like, is this shit?
The classic problem.
One of my clients actually just sent me like the first third of his next book that he's working on. And so like, not everybody likes to do that, but I like that because now I would be like, here's some problems I anticipate, like, you know, here's some ideas for while you're moving forward. And that way, like, you know, I feel like it's, instead of having to go back and revise the entire thing, we can kind of develop it together from the beginning.
Yes. Okay. That is really helpful, especially for big projects. Like, and I don't rep like fantasy and sci-fi, but for those kind of projects, that would be really helpful because they have so much like world building. It would be really nice to have someone be like, hey, like, did you think about how toilets are going to work in this world? And I'm like, I don't know.
Nope.
Yeah, I didn't give it a single thought. Okay.
Kind of on that note, tangentially, this is something I should have asked you right at the beginning, but what genres do you represent?
So I rep adults only, no children's, basically across contemporary genres. So no sci-fi, no fantasy, but I will do like slight speculative if it's like really grounded. Aside from that, everything.
Okay.
And I do want to get into nonfiction, but that is an avenue I've not quite gone down yet.
Okay, I love that. Unfortunately, nothing that I write, which really hurts.
I know, right? I have found all of the like networking that I did before becoming an agent, all of the people I've become friends with on Twitter, they are all fantasy or sci-fi authors.
Oh my goodness.
You're like, oops. I don't know how that happened, but...
Well, we just keep spawning too, so that doesn't help.
Yeah, choose
Everywhere
that
you
way.
look, there's a new one.
That's a good genre appropriate description for that. Okay, we're getting into some more like advice column type things. So my next question for you is, what are the top mistakes you see writers make in their queries or with their first pages, the pages that you would get from a submission?
So queries, I personally, and I'm sure people would disagree with me, I think that a lot of authors get caught up in like following the standards of a query letter. So like comps, metadata, the hook, the stake, setting up who the character is and their stakes. And like that is all information that we need, of course. But a lot of authors forget to put like, what is the heart of their story? What is unique to their story that makes it stand out?
Yeah.
And so what happens is a lot of queries read the exact same. It's like this character and these stakes and this happens and this. And it's literally like, it's like almost word for word, except with like a different character name and a different stake.
Oh, wow.
And like, especially if I'm looking through like 10, say, thriller queries all at once, like half of them will read the exact same. So obviously we need the information that like is why that standard has become the like standard practice.
Yeah.
Find a way to like infuse the heart of your story into it and make that the highlight, not like the metadata.
And when you're saying heart, are you thinking like the theme or just the main plot point, or how do you have examples of what you mean?
It can be any of the above. Some stories have a super fun and interesting tone that makes it stand out. Some have like a super unique character from like a marginalized background that we don't see a lot. So like that might be something to highlight. Some have just like a really cool unheard of hook that like has not been seen on the market recently. Like whatever the thing is that makes your book like your book, try to highlight that.
Okay, so for me that's like the vibes. Like you want to get the vibes of it.
Yeah, totally the vibes.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
And then as far as like first pages, it obviously depends on the genre of the book. But the thing that I find is missing a lot is like, I really want to be set up for the tone of the book. That doesn't mean I need to know like the hook right from the beginning. I don't need to see the like catalyst right in those first pages. But like, if your hook is like some really dark and dreadful thing, have something really dark and dreadful happening in the first pages so I know what I'm getting into.
Yeah.
And don't do like a switcheroo where, you know, the beginning is super like happy and like rom-com sounding, and then all of a sudden this horrible thing happens. That can work, but like, I feel like most readers want to know what they're getting into.
Okay, this is true. And this is why I like to read the first page of a book when I'm at the bookstore and I'm picking up something that's like not on my list that I haven't, you know, read a bunch of reviews on or whatever. And I will read the first page and I'm like, does this feel like the right vibe for me?
Yeah, it's vibes. It all comes back to vibes.
Yeah, it does. And that's where I'm at right now with like my latest idea. Like all I have to go on is vibes. I don't got character names or anything. And I'm like, okay, I think I could do that. But I think that's something like we talk about when we do our first page critiques on the show is like, yeah, we don't have the full picture. We don't have like, you know, a query or a synopsis to refer to. Yeah. But the one we did today, like the vibes were perfect for it. But you know, say we went 3 more pages and it turned into like a rom-com, we'd be like, oh, that was very
wait a second,
that didn't work, that was misrepresented. I can see that kind of being an issue. And because people put so much work into their first pages, do you see a lot of submissions where like the first chapter is really polished and then the rest of it isn't? Or is that not as common as I'm thinking?
We see this all the time. My biggest advice is if you are paying for a query critique package that includes like your query in your first 3 chapters or something like that, which most of them do, that is a great idea. Do that. Take the advice and put it through to the rest of your novel. Because so this was actually like such a sad learning curve that happened for me right when I was at the beginning of agenting. I was so excited for this full and I was like, I jumped right into it. And literally as soon as the 3rd chapter ended, the book totally changed. Like the tone, the writing style, everything was different. And I was so sad. And I went to our founder and I was like, this thing happened. And she was like, this happens all the time.
Oh,
no. Like, my dreams have been crushed.
Seriously, yeah. And it was like a big like realization moment of like, oh, like this is gonna happen a lot. Oh no.
No.
Bummer.
So it's gotten to the point, like, maybe because we've workshopped a lot and we talk a lot about writing and everything like that. I've been picking up some books lately, and I've just been like, I can tell this didn't get workshopped. Like, the first few chapters are good, and I'm like, all right, yeah. So like, someone looked at those first few chapters, but then it just slowly kind of falls apart
or
as
quickly.
the story goes on. Yeah, or like the ending doesn't work, like totally off base from what I was promised at the beginning.
Yeah,
so,
and I will say, like, a querying novel does not have to be perfect. But like, there are things that are so much easier for me to overlook than like the entire like tone of the story changing in the middle. Like typos and stuff, no big deal. I can change that in 5 seconds. But like a giant plot hole or something, like that's the kind of stuff that's harder to overlook.
Yeah.
So like, I would also say, like, don't stress yourself too much to make sure it's like perfect, but like focus on the things that are harder for an agent to fix.
Okay, yeah, like developmental type stuff.
Yeah, or like structural things. I often don't like to touch things that are like I struggle to tell an author, like, yeah, I'll sign you, but we need to change the entire like structure of your novel. Like, I don't want to do that to somebody. Because it feels like extortion, kind of, in a way. Like, you know,
like,
and so
I'll sign you, but only if.
Right? I don't like doing that. But sometimes there's just so much going on that's like, but I can't sign it in its current state. Like,
have you asked for any revise and resubmits?
I have probably asked for a way higher percentage than most people do.
Okay.
And it's for that reason. It's because I feel very strongly about like not forcing an author to change too much about their book.
So
but at the same time, if they're willing, then yeah. So I have probably sent out, in the like 4 months I've been agenting, I've probably sent out like, I want to say like 6 R&Rs.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And you know what? I put a lot of time and effort into them, and so far none of them have come back to me.
Oh wow.
No.
Well,
some of them have been in touch and said like they're going to.
Oh yeah. I was just gonna say.
But who knows? They might not. They might, and that's kind of the risk I take. Is like, I'm giving you my creative ideas. You can run with them if you want, and that's the risk I take in not signing them at that point.
Yeah.
So hopefully some of them will come back to me.
Okay, and then an add-on to this question that was not on our list. When you're reading a full, what does it take for you to just stop and say this isn't it? In terms of craft, and not in like, you know, for marketing or whatever, but like if you're reading it and like in terms of the story itself, the writer's ability, what are the things that make you go, this isn't going to work, or we won't be a good partnership? Yeah,
there's a couple things that have come out a lot recently. One is if the voice of the character is not something I can get into, which almost every single time for me is when the voice sounds really, really young, because I only rep adult. So it's not like I can even make the shift to like, let's pitch this as a YA. I don't rep YA. And that has happened surprisingly a lot, where it's pitched as an adult novel and then it reads like a YA. And I'm like, because I don't rep YA, like I can't really do anything with that. The other thing that I've found a lot lately is lots and lots and lots of info dumping. And like, we can work with that to a point, but sometimes when I'm reading and I've gotten to like page 120 of like info dumping in every single chapter, it gets to a point where I'm like, this is beyond what I can develop, and it becomes like,
this isn't just like a one chapter issue. It's a habit.
It's a full book.
It's a full book. It's a habit that you have to help unbreak, and that's a lot more work.
Exactly. Yeah.
I like how you just listed like the 2 things I hate most in books. Info dumps. Like, there's probably 3 or 4 proper rants on our show of me ranting about info dumps in particular, because I hate them so much. And then the other thing that I don't like is when I pick up a book that's supposed to be adult. Sorry, Maggie is chiming in and crying right now. She agrees. When I pick up a book that's like it's supposed to be an adult book, and then the voice is very young adult, and then they age it up by adding like some sex or some swearing, like I'm out. Like there was one book recently, like I finished because I felt obligated. And then I had another one that I just DNF'd because I was like, I can't read this, that this should never have been pitched as adult. Like whatever editor looked at this and was like, this is adult, like shame on you. Because it was just not at all. And yeah, that really makes it hard for me to read them. So yeah, I like love that we're kind of all on the same page here. Yeah, but the info dumps are hard because it is, like Elise said, it's usually a habit. Yeah. For a writer. Yeah. And that's hard to break.
Like when I'm evaluating something based on like how much editing needs to be done, I'm totally happy to do like multiple rounds of edits, but it's like there can only be so many layers of editing needed before it's too much for me, for my comfort levels, like as an editor. Like I'm not an editor. So like if it's, you know, like some grammar and that kind of stuff on top of like character development, I'm happy with that. But if it's like the grammar and typos on top of character development, on top of like plot pacing, like if it becomes like so many like layers, then it's like I lose track of even how to edit that. And like that's why then I personally have to pull out, because I'm like, I can't guide you on this.
And so when you see submissions like that, is that like a sign that they just need to have more practice, or they need a critique partner? Like what does that say to you when you're reading it?
It could be one of a number of things. It's probably that they need more critique, or that they need more critique that I will actually listen to. I've had a handful of authors who I hate to like say this, but they're just stubborn. They think their book is perfect and they don't want to do anything to it, you know. And I've sent some very complimentary passes that have then blown up in my face because the person gets very mad.
I'm so sorry.
I know. I mean, it's
people suck.
It's part of the job, but it's like, I think if you want to be published, you really have to know that like whatever your book is at its early stage, it's going to go through so many changes to get published. And the further you get into that process, the less control you're going to have, especially if you are with like a big 5 publisher. And if your dream is to have it exactly your way, you can find a way to do it that way, deciding to self-pub or maybe like an independent or something, and that's totally valid. But like if your dream is like a big publisher and traditional publishing, like you're going to lose control at some point. You have to grapple with that.
Yeah, I can see that being a bit of a struggle for me as a control freak over here. But at the same time, I also like thrive on getting feedback. So, you know, I think
it's so interesting to me how different people respond to feedback of like some people, are really stubborn. I mean, I'm an editor. I've worked with clients who like, they take my, like they pay me to tell them honestly what I think and what my expertise says. And then they're like, I just think it's better this way. I'm like, I'm telling you why it's not. Like, at least have a rebuttal for me, but they don't. And that's really frustrating. But like, even as you're talking now of like losing control and stuff, there's people that take that as like, ooh, I know I like to be in control, and that could be really hard for me. Having that self-awareness, really important. And then there's people like me who's like, oh, so at a certain point I get to stop making decisions? Cool, take it. Go for it.
That's me too. I'm the same way. I'm like, just take it out of my hands. Go on.
I don't want to think about it anymore. It's out of my hands.
It's such a long process from like query to like your book being on the shelf. Like I figure at some point, like most writers are probably like, you know what, just do what you think.
Just stop caring,
man.
I can't look at this book again.
I love hearing those words because like when someone approaches me and they've edited the heck out of their book and they are sick to death of it, it's like, okay, I know you're willing to do like pretty much anything to make this as good as it can be. That's a wonderful sign. And when they hand it over to me and say like, I don't want to look at this anymore, but I want you to tell me how to fix it, like, and just like you do what you need to do. It's like, okay, so you're willing to like do the work now. And you're being honest about that. And it's like, okay, that's the mark of like, this should work out. This will be a good arrangement.
So after you and a client have agreed to work together and they've signed a contract with you, what happens next?
So the first thing is the fun announcement. Our agency does Twitter announcements, but I always give my authors like the choice, like, because I know some people want to announce that themselves. So we do a fun Twitter announcement. Everybody gets all excited. And then I always book a call, like basically within the next couple of days or as soon as we can. with my author. Basically, this is to just discuss if they have any lingering questions since the last time we talked, because it's probably been over 2 weeks since we talked, or at least since we talked on a call. We discuss edits, which I always discuss edits like on the offer call as well. So we kind of go over if there's anything more that wasn't discussed on the call, or sometimes it's literally just like, you good with what we talked about? Okay, cool. And then I also just get them set up with, I give all of my authors like access to a Google Drive that has like their submission list and things like that. So I just make sure that they have access, that they're good to go. And then when we hang up, I start editing. So I always do unless the author has like some big idea that they've decided they want to do, I would let them do that. But otherwise, I do the first round of edits. I like to do most of my edits in the doc as like comments, unless there is any big like overarching things, then I would do an edit letter. I usually try to get the initial edits back within like a week or two if I can.
Wow.
Because I want to get that ball rolling. Like basically like a newly signed client who is not yet on sub is kind of highest priority as far as editing. Anyone who's on sub is going to be lower priority like for next projects and things like that. Because kind of the goal is like get everybody on sub. Yeah, so then while they are doing their side of the edits, I would then be building a submission list, kind of deciding an order of like who we're submitting to first. I would also be writing the pitch letter, which is usually based on the query letter. There's pretty typically like changes to it, but like, you know, the base of the information is kind of the same as the query letter. The pitch tends to be a little longer, maybe a little more detailed, maybe a little more like targeted to a specific editor's tastes and things like that. We go back and forth on that edit process, basically track changes on until we are both super happy with the result. I always do a final proofread before we go on sub, because I feel responsible if there's like a typo or something. Like I'm the one sending it to the editor, so like if there's a big typo in it, I'm like, that was me, it was my fault.
Oh no. This is fascinating to me. Like I didn't realize how much editing an agent can be responsible for.
And not everybody does. Like there are definitely agents who do no editing or very, very little editing.
Yeah.
I'm like, for me, I mean, there's definitely a limit to the amount of editing I will do. But like for me, if it's a story that I really, really feel passionately about, like I am happy to do, you know, somewhat significant edits. In the very first client that I signed, I think I tweeted about this because I was like, wow, this is kind of funny. In the first 4 weeks of like, basically like since I first read his full submission until we were ready to go on sub, I read his book 4 times in 4 weeks.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
And I was like, this is why an agent has to really like your book.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay, because I had a couple rejections for the last book I queried. They're like, I liked it, but I'm not like passionate enough about it. And I understand that now because like they're gonna read it almost as many times as I have had to read it. So they better like it. You know?
Yeah. And
Holy
it's like
crap.
people get really upset about that. And I get it, like, because it's like you're having to convince somebody to like love your baby. Like it sucks. But at the same time, it's like there is some little thing where it's like you really do have to, you don't have to love it, but you have to be willing to read it a lot. And think that you can sell it, you know, and get along with the author. There's so many pieces to it.
I don't know if I would even read my own book 4 times in 4 weeks. Nope. Couldn't convince me to do that.
Wait,
I need more time than that.
I spent like 6 months on my last set of edits, and then I sent it to Elise, and I was like, I never want to see this again. This is your problem now. I'm over it. So speaking of like wanting to work with the author, what are some like red flags for you when you're talking to an author that you want to bring on or a writer that you want to bring on? What's kind of a red flag that like maybe they're not going to be a good fit for you or they'll be difficult to work with?
There's not a lot. Like, I think a lot of authors think that there's like this like agent blacklist where we like like have this list of people that nobody wants to sign. It's not true. Unless I'm just not aware of it, I've never seen anything like that. When I'm looking at a query, like, I mean, the initial thing for me is the query. Like, if the query and like the synopsis, and then of course the pages, I do always look at the author if they've sent information. I do try to find like their Twitter just to have a little scroll. I'm not looking for anything specific. I'm more just looking to make sure they're not like spouting really horrible, hate-filled opinions on the internet and
yes.
like that. The only other thing that like I'm super sensitive about, which is a little like sometimes harder to determine, is like I don't love representing a book that is written in the POV of like a marginalized community if the person's not a part of that community.
Yeah.
It happens all the time in publishing, but like I just don't feel comfortable with that. And so sometimes you can find that information very easily, sometimes you can't. So sometimes it's just like, well, I want to read this and I can't tell for sure that they are not part of that community, so like we'll read it.
Sure.
But I have definitely passed on things where, you know, they were writing from a POV that they are not a part of, and I was like, yeah, not for me.
Yeah, so that's something I saw a discussion about pretty recently, I think on Threads, not on Twitter.
I'm in the middle of a discussion on that
on
Instagram right now. Yeah, it's very interesting.
There's some writers who have married like POC, and then they took their last name, and so now they're writing from that community, and but they're white.
Yeah.
So it's a bit like it puts a, like, if you didn't look at the author photo or something, like you would just assume by their last name that like, yes, they were writing from their own personal experiences growing up or whatever. And so it's a bit of like I don't know, it's tasteless.
And it's also like you also can't always tell from their photo
or their name,
right? So it's like I would never expect this, but I love it when in the author bio the person says like, this is me writing from my own experience as a whatever. It's very helpful. Like that then I have to not do the research, and then it's a lot easier for me to be like, okay, please send me your full. Not that I would expect people to have to do that, because like I obviously am not going to force people to like out themselves. But you know, that is helpful if it's something you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. This is a more technical question, so if you want to just go through it quickly, or just in list form, however feels best to you. But we talked a bit about going on submission or on sub, which is another way to say that, which is when, you know, you've signed on with an agent, the agent has worked through the manuscript with you a bit, if that's their style, and then you're sending it out to publishers, to editors to see who might want to pick it up. That's how I'm understanding the process so far. So then our question is like, how does that process work? How much detail can you provide on that?
Yeah, so like I said, like while the author's working on edits, I typically will like curate a list of editors, write the pitch letter, get all of that stuff prepped. Once we are totally satisfied with the manuscript, we pick a day and we send emails. I send emails. It's honestly like a very fun day because first of all, it's very exciting for the author to go on sub for the first time, and like the dread of like not getting responses forever hasn't hit them yet. So like they're very excited.
Yes.
The other thing is a lot of editors will reply back right away and be like, oh, so excited to hear from you. Can't wait to read this. And it's like this day where you're getting like tons of excitement.
Gratifying. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good day. It's a good day to go on sub. As far as like how I find editors and stuff, like I'm kind of constantly keeping a list. So like if I see a report of like a sale and I'm like, oh, that sounds like something I would potentially rep, I will write that editor's name down, keep them on a list. And then I am also frequently meeting with editors on video chats and like just chatting like, hey, what are you looking for? What kinds of things are you interested in? And that way I can sort of curate, you know, who might fit with which of my authors or which of my projects.
Okay, I like that sort of, it's like a bit of a community thing. You're like, okay, you're keeping your finger on the pulse, as they say. So you're getting an idea of what they want. And that's really cool. Okay, I like that. So what happens when a writer can't fulfill their contract for whatever reason?
So thankfully, I have not had to deal with this yet. Hopefully never. What I will say is that when an author signs with a publishing house, like my job shifts a little bit and I almost become more of like a project manager in a sense. So the best way to deal with this is to get ahead of it, in my opinion. So I would be like in the lead up to a deadline, for example, I would be like checking in with the author, like, are we going to meet this deadline? Are we good? That way we know well in advance if we're not going to meet the deadline, and we can deal with it like with advance notice, which then, you know, it's probably not a problem. Things can be shifted. Whereas if we are tackling that like on the day it's due and suddenly the author's like, I didn't do it, now we're in trouble. I mean, things can be shifted, but keeping in mind, like, you are under contract. Legally, you are obligated to do those things. I don't anticipate that a publishing house would like sue you because you didn't meet a deadline, but they, you know, you've broken the contract, so the contract is now broken. So in theory, they legally could just drop you if they wanted. Again, probably not going to happen because they've probably already put a lot of work into you. But they're not going to be happy with you, and you've probably ruined any chance of publishing with them again in the future.
Yeah.
So yeah, my advice is, and especially as the agent, is like stay on top of these things, get ahead of them, and discuss them openly.
Do you recommend that writers have a lawyer look over their publishing contract or their contract with you, or how straightforward are these documents?
I mean, I would never recommend against it. If that's something that's going to make you more comfortable, absolutely do it. I will say at ArtHouse, I don't know about other agencies, we have like a third-party contracts team that is like, they know publishing contracts, and it is their job to look over our publishing contracts and like flag anything concerning. So like, me personally, I would feel comfortable not having a separate lawyer also look over it. But if that would make the author feel more comfortable, do it 100% of the time. Like, go for it.
Keeping to that kind of same area, we're talking legal. We're talking legal right now. That's just what we're doing. What happens once a contract is signed with a publisher, and then what are the steps that follow?
Yeah, it's kind of very similar in some ways to like once you've signed with an agent.
Yeah.
Anticipate that everything with a publisher is going to be slower. Like, you know, if you're signing with me, you'll have your contract within a few days most of the time. If you're signing with a publisher, it can be months. But like I said, so my job kind of shifts a little bit, and you will then have direct access like to your editor to like talk to your editor and things like that. Things will still come through me as well. But like my job, like I said, it kind of becomes more like project manager-ish. It is also then my job to step in and like, if one of my authors is like, hey, I'm having this problem and I'm not comfortable talking to my editor themselves, like, it's kind of my job to like be that person of like, I can talk to them for you. We can discuss this together. But yeah, similar to signing with an agent, you would go through rounds of edits. There's obviously more steps with a publisher. Like, you get a cover at some point, and you will be able to, depending on your contract, like negotiate the cover a little bit like that. There may be discussions about like the title of your book. There may be discussions about, or there probably will be discussions about marketing. Like, they're going to ask you how much marketing you're comfortable with. They will these days generally expect authors to promote on their own social media. So there will be discussions about that. And there is like a marketing and PR team as well. And you can ask them things and ask them for help and stuff like that. But yeah, it becomes a little more of like the team expands and there's so many more moving parts. But it is the agent's job to kind of keep everything on track and make sure the author never feels like lost in the void somewhere.
I see what you mean when you say it's like project managing. That's essentially what you're doing. So when it comes to marketing, how much help do authors get from like a publishing house?
It varies. vastly differs depending on the publishing house itself, depending on your specific contract. Like that is something that can be negotiated, and it's something that kind of just depends A, on the publishing house, and B, on like how much budget they have left and they want to put you in. And generally we don't have a ton of control over that, but we can always ask for more or ask for help. If you are willing to do marketing, ask them for guidance is what I would say. Because if you show initiative, they're probably going to put more effort into your marketing.
Oh, interesting.
Not a guarantee, but it's something that like I would say, you know, if you're comfortable with it, go for it. But yeah, it's really one of those things that at the contract stage, even more at the offer stage, I would say, like they kind of know in advance, like this is kind of the date we're going to slot this into. This is the budget for marketing we have. They will also make estimates of like, if they think this is going to be like a mid-list or a bestseller, like right from the beginning, they kind of have those thoughts in their head, and that's going to affect the marketing budget. And it can be negotiated to a point. But yeah, my suggestion would be always to try to show a lot of initiative with it, because they will be willing to help you.
Okay, that's good to know.
Good tip.
So when an agent wants something marketable, like they obviously always want something that's marketable, how do you reconcile what's marketable today versus what the market could or will be like when that book is finally out in the world?
So as somebody who works in marketing as my day job, I kind of hate that term in publishing, because like I can take a rock and I can market a rock. If I put my effort and campaign, like if I put a marketing campaign behind it, literally anything in the world is marketable. It just means you're marketing it. So I kind of shy away from that term. I think more often people are looking for like trends or
what's
like
trending.
What's going to be trending potentially, or like especially like what kind of topics, you know, like there's maybe some murmurs about like on social media, like certain topics, or like some big event happens and like that's going to maybe push certain topics to becoming more popular. So for me, when I'm, instead of looking at things that like I think are going to be like marketable, air quotes, marketable, I'm looking at like when I'm talking to editors, what kinds of things are they looking for? Because for me, my marketing is I'm marketing to an editor in a way. Their job is marketing to the market. So if I'm following the things that they're looking for, then I'm kind of accomplishing my step. And just kind of listening to like what they all say. And they all have different tastes, but a lot of them have very similar, like, you know, things that like the publishing house is looking for the next few years. So that's kind of how I try to follow it.
Yeah. Do you have some examples of what the publishing house is looking for this, e.g., anything specific you could share?
So one that comes to mind is that does not help me is romantasy is huge right now.
Okay.
Everybody wants it. Everybody is closing to like sci-fi and stuff because they just want romantasy. And I'm like, I don't rep fantasy, so I'm out on that one.
See, I like to write romantasy, but it's kind of now getting to the point where there's so many books out there that I just feel like regurgitated stories, and there's like a lot less original feeling stories. Like I know, like that's maybe a snobby term, like original, but there's so many that they're just the same plot devices over and over, and they're like, oh, if I just write this romantasy and I put in an enemies to lovers and a one bed trope and a sassy best friend, like I got a bestseller. And at some point I think people are going to get tired of reading that same thing. I mean, there's still tons of amazing unique stories out there that I love and more coming out, but it's just something that I'm seeing in like the romantasy thing. So when people recommend a book to me, like have a look, and I'm like, okay, do I feel like I've read this before or not?
Yep.
All right. So I know we had a little bit of conversation around these next couple questions before we even hopped on the show together. So we might want to start with defining some terms. We're going to start talking about advantages and disadvantages of traditional publishing, and then pitting that against like indie publishing, which is distinct from self-publishing. And those two terms get tossed around interchangeably all over the place, but they are not.
And there are also independent publishers like that agents submit to. So it gets even more like overlap. When people say indie publishing, I'm always like,
what do you mean?
Which way do you mean that?
Yeah. So if you don't mind like kind of addressing that conversation a little bit, what are the different ways that you can go indie?
So yes. So in what I would call the umbrella of like traditional publishing is where you get an agent, your agent is pitching your book to publishers. That can be independent publishers, some of which only take agented submissions and some of which can also take unagented submissions.
Lovely.
Which is where that overlap starts. And then there is like, I guess what is typically called indie publishing, which I think is like either people who submit to those independent publishers who don't or who do take unagented submissions and get published that way. Keeping in mind that some of those publishing houses also take agented submissions. So like there's such an overlap there.
Yeah.
Indie publishing, I think, as far as I'm aware, can also include like vanity publishing, which is where you like pay somebody to basically you pay a publishing house to print your book, essentially, is as far as I kind of understand it. And then like self-pub is like its own beast where like it is your book and you are responsible for absolutely everything. Whether or not you're doing it yourself or like paying a contractor or something to do it, it is all on your shoulder.
Yeah, those are the terms as we know it. And yeah, it's a lot more complicated than you think it is once you start getting into it. But we've kind of defined the terms. I think we have a pretty good general understanding of the different avenues with exceptions of the overlaps. But what about advantages of like traditional publishing, which is where I imagine you'll be most familiar versus some of those other avenues?
So first of all, I will say I commend anyone who can self-publish. Like as an author myself, I don't have the gumption for that. That is too many like responsibilities for me. So in that avenue, going traditional publishing, like you can kind of let go and rely on the people who you work with. A lot of the big decisions, a lot of the organization of the entire process is in the hands of professionals who are experts in this. So like you are not responsible for literally every piece anymore, which is like, in my opinion, the biggest advantage. The other things are like if you're signing with like a well-known publishing house, you kind of have this instant network of like authors and editors and, you know, anybody who's associated with this publishing house. Plus, you know, the publishing house is more recognizable to like bookstores and things like that. Like if you're a bookstore and you're ordering books, you know, and you see some coming in from a publishing house you've literally never heard of, or you see some coming in from like Berkeley, you know, depending on how busy you are, you might look at the Berkeley ones first.
Sure.
You know, something along those lines. You kind of have this network of just like automated, I don't want to say automated entry because everything's still difficult, of course, but like,
of like reputation.
Yeah, the reputation is kind of behind the publishing house. They put that reputation behind you as an author, and that can help. You do have a potential for a strong marketing budget. It's not guaranteed. Like we said, it can be negotiated to a point. Yeah. But there is the potential. Publishing houses have deep pockets as much as they don't like to use them sometimes for certain things. But the potential is there. And then the other thing is if you're traditional publishing, you don't have to front the costs of anything. Yeah. You hopefully get paid as one of those costs somebody else is fronting.
Okay, you're making me want to get my shit together to query. Because I'm like, man, you're making some really good points. It would be nice if someone was doing all that work for me.
Okay, but now ask the next question.
The next question. What are the disadvantages of trad pub versus the other avenues?
So yeah, kind of mirroring the advantages, you have way less control. Basically over every piece of the result of your book. Like you you can negotiate obviously having some creative control, but at the end of the day, you lose a lot of it. And the other thing too is like, it's a balance. Like if you want to negotiate more creative control, you're likely going to get a smaller advance or a smaller marketing budget, or maybe a big publisher is not going to want to take you on. You'll end up having to go with a smaller one, which some people are totally fine with in order to have that control. So it's just kind of about deciding like where your values are, like what you prioritize. The other disadvantage is that like the big one that's like screaming in everybody's face is like, it's so difficult to get in. Right. There are so many hoops to jump through. There are so many barriers to entry, and like some people just don't have it in them to keep going, and I totally understand that because it's so hard. Whereas like with self-publishing, like if you really want to do it, there is nobody stopping you. You can just do it.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think the appeal of self-publishing is the creative control, and if you're kind of have to do a lot of marketing on your own regardless, you're like, well then, you know, at least I have complete control. But yeah, those are also really good points.
Well, and then there's the timeline, like not only with self-publishing, not like if you want to do it, you can do it whenever you want. And then you can accelerate or decelerate that timeline for whatever reason. Whereas with traditional publishing, you are beholden to deadlines. And those deadlines can get shifted by people other than you. So the timeline is just, it is not within your control. It's another thing of control, but it's just a more specific one of like, they say traditional publishing moves at a glacial pace. Expect to wait long time.
And I know like some self-pub authors who will like release a book every 6 months and they make a living off of that. And that's great. I don't have that. That's a lot of work.
Fair.
But respect to those who can.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's also the part of it. It's not just people that maybe don't want to keep trying to get into trad publishing, but it's also like, do they have the motivation and the dedication to do all the hard work that comes with self-publishing? Like Elise did. She did all the hard work. And it was hard work. It was a lot. It was a lot.
And I cut corners like heck. So, you know, if I was going to do it, it was very much a learning experience. And I've been open about that from the beginning. Like it was just very experimental of like, what does this take? And I looked at some things, I was like, I frankly just don't want to do that right now. So I'm not going to. And that is to my advantage and to my detriment. Like if you don't want to put in the work, if you're not willing to put in the work, it's not going to go well. That's just like, that is the trade-off. So you have to be very willing. And the unfortunate truth is you do need to have some funding for your self-publishing projects. And that can vary greatly, like what you're going to put your money into. You know, maybe you don't want to spend $1,000 on a cover, but you do want to spend like $3,000 on all the editing and the formatting and stuff. Or you're going to do it all yourself and make it, but it would take you twice as long. And you know, you should be a little tech savvy. So while I'm saying this, I know that's not me, but that's something I think people forget. And I've actually seen authors like on Twitter and stuff being like, or on Instagram too, where they're a bit like, well, you know, be nice, like self-publishing is hard and it's expensive. And it's like, those things are all true, but you're still trying to sell a product to people. So you should, it's got to be as good as you can make it. On whatever budget you chose. The budget thing is a huge barrier, and I absolutely feel for that. Like that's why, like, I didn't pay for things. I just, you know, kind of monkey wrench things into place because I didn't have the budget for it. That happens, but also like be realistic with yourself. If you're like, if you're not able or willing to put in whatever needs to be put in to make a product that people are going to want to buy, like no one is obligated to buy your work. There's no reason, like no one needs to read what you put out. Like you don't get a return on just putting in all the work. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it's a lot of work, but that does not mean that someone has to be nice and now come along and read it because you put it, like you did that to yourself. That's why it's called self-publishing. You didn't have to put in all that work, but you chose to. So don't expect any reciprocal, like, it's a weird vibe out there that I see where people are like, you
Yeah.
know, I put all this work into it. Why aren't you appreciating it? It's like no one is guaranteed to do that. So you have to be ready for that too, of like just crickets.
Yeah.
It can happen.
Cricket. And the disappointment that sometimes comes with that. Like maybe your friends and family are the only ones that buy it for like the first year it's out.
Yeah. Or maybe your first project, like the only people who buy it, that's it. And then you have to do it, and you have to decide if you want to do another one and maybe do things differently to try and see if you can change that. And it's just, it's hard. It's a lot. It can feel very lonely, but there's enough people out there doing it. And this is true for traditional too, because like we've talked about the timeline and the waiting and all of that is so hard. And the constant rejection. And I mean, I've heard that like from an agent perspective, that's hard too, because like you are champion, like you're the champion for this thing. You love it. You think it can be successful. You want to see it be successful. And then, we got rejected again. And you have to be the bearer of bad news. So you're like, please don't shoot the messenger. But sorry to have to tell you this. Like that is rough, man.
Yeah.
That's absolutely brutal. Now we've talked us down into a slump, and
on a depressing note,
and now to like draw us out of that, because like we're all still here because we love this thing. We love books, we love writing, we love seeing stories, and we want them to be out in the world. Carleen, we'd like to know, what are your plans for your own writing right now? Like, we're taking a step back from the agent conversation. We know you're a writer. You write thrillers. I'd love to hear about anything else that you write as well, because I think Maria might know more about this than I do. But yeah, just tell us a bit about that.
So the timeline worked really well for me because I was agented and on sub before I became an agent.
Oh.
So I was on sub and I had outlined the next thing. So truthfully, since becoming an agent, I have not even thought about my own writing. I've been like full on focus mode on signing clients and like getting that rolling. I have started to like feel the itch a little bit lately, like to write again. So I think soon. I've been on sub 6 months now.
Okay.
Oh gosh, I don't want to know it's been that long.
Brutal. Wow.
I'm mostly just trying to pretend I'm not on sub and like forget about it.
Yeah.
But I am feeling that itch again to like write. So I think I will be hopefully soon writing again. Thrillers, and interestingly, like I read a lot of thriller. I always have, and I write thriller. And when I started agenting, I actually thought I would sign a ton of thrillers, and I haven't because and I think maybe it's because like that's what I write, and so like it's kind of there's a bit of like a weirdness there in somehow, but I have yet to find a thriller to sign.
Well, I imagine that because you spend so much time reading and writing and thinking about the genre, for someone to get into your inbox with something that like, I haven't seen this before, it's interesting, it grabs me, and it hits all the beats for me, and I'm more picky because I know what I like and what I don't like now.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I imagine that like if you do find a thriller that you really want to rep, that'll probably be a pretty big deal, but it could be hard to find that just because of how well you know the world of it.
Yeah, that's true.
Which brings me to my next question. Do you have any book recommendations for us?
Hey.
I do. I brought a little selection.
Yay.
So the first one that I will say is Bunny by Mona Awad. This is a very weird book that whenever I see a book in my query pile comped to Bunny, I'm immediately excited. It is probably the first book I've ever read that like lines from it were repeating in my head afterwards. And then, so my next book is called A Novel Obsession. It is by Caitlin Barasch. I don't know if I'm saying her last name right. It is contemporary, just kind of like general fiction. It's a little bit slower, but it's just like super intriguing. It's a really interesting story. It's like a nice fresh voice that I really enjoyed. Is like a bit of a mix up from reading thrillers. And then the last book on my list is called The Ark by Tory, Henwood, Hoen. It is a romance technically, but it is the type of romance that I really want to see in my inbox. It has a really, really strong B plot that almost like takes over the story almost more than the romance at some points. And it's really interesting. It almost is like speculative a little bit, but yet it still follows sort of like the typical romance like genre points, which I thought was cool.
Okay, well, that one's probably going to be added to my list because I was like, romance? You have my attention. See, I used to really like thrillers, and I've read like a few like of the popular ones, and I did enjoy them, but I sometimes think maybe I don't enjoy them anymore because my anxiety is like too high.
Oh, no. I do find like if I read more than like 2 thrillers in a row, like I really have to take a break.
Yeah, because they do get you like
all
hyped up. I realize the listeners cannot see me making faces right now. But yeah, like I remember reading, obviously I did read Gone Girl, but the other books by Gillian Flynn are really intense. Like I think it was, what's the name of it? Dark Places by her was slightly traumatizing, but like it was really good. That was a good one, but I couldn't sleep after I read that one. And I read this one I've talked about on the show before, but I cannot totally remember the name. It's a James Rollins book set in the Amazon. It might just be called Amazon or something. And I was like, yeah, read it. Sounds kind of interesting. And my dad had read it before me and loaned it to me. And he's like, don't read it before bed. And I was like, whatever, chicken shit. So I read it and I did not sleep all night. It was absolutely terrifying. So yeah, I do like them, but it really just depends like on my mood because I'm a mood reader. So Thank you so much for coming on the show. We learned so much and we loved having you.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you for having me.
And if anybody wants to query you, we will put your contact information in the links for the show notes. And that's the tea on literary agents. Don't forget to rate and review wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on social media. We are at the Tea Grannies Podcast on Instagram and Threads and at the Tea Grannies on Twitter. Thank you for listening and happy writing.